Good morning, Illini. Welcome back to another Healthy Illini podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schrock. As always, glad you're with us. We are talking today about wellness in a bit of a different aspect than some might think. We've done it before, but it's always, people kind of look at us funny when we talk about finances as being a part of your wellness, but it really is. It plays a huge part into that. And we've talked about it some before, but we're taking a little bit of a different aspect today in some of the planning side of finances. And so excited to have this conversation. I'm joined today by a return guest, Sterling Raskie. He is a senior lecturer with Gies Department of Finance. And if you go back in our archive and look back at episode 90, back in November of 2023, you'll see he was on an episode about building a strong financial future. And I'm thrilled to have him back with us. Sterling, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
One of the reasons I love working with college-age students with this campus and this kind of time period of people's lives is because it's really an exciting and interesting period where you're kind of first stepping into adulthood, and you have an opportunity to make all kinds of decisions. And sometimes those decisions are, well, the obvious ones are like what you eat, where you live, how you organize your days, but also how you spend your leisure time. For a lot of people, you've kind of spent your downtime where your parents said to go, or where your sports teams decided they needed to be. That's kind of how you planned everything around that. But now you've got this kind of blank canvas of where you can go and what you can do. And for a lot of students, that means the first time you can decide where and how you want to spend your vacations. That's something somebody might not think about a whole lot, but it involves where you might want to go, what you might want to do, all of those things. And with those new opportunities also comes the inexperience of how to prepare and plan to make those things happen, because that's a huge part of it, and it's a big step. And so before we get to some of the practical financial aspects of planning, you had mentioned something in your prep work that I wanted to kind of touch base on, and that's kind of like deciding what type of activity you want to do or what kind of trip you want to do, and getting kind of the framework on how you want to spend that time. So just what kind of advice do you have on the initial point of planning? Like when you're just that idea of what I want to do, you kind of mentioned about experiences and things like that. So if you would give a little bit of a background of what you were thinking when you shared that.
Yeah, for me, I'll speak from personal experiences. If it helps, I look at, for example, if I'm going to be taking a trip for the first time anywhere, whether that might be overseas or whether that might be here domestically. Obviously, Google is a powerful tool, so I might look up and do some research in that area. What are the places to see? For me personally, where there might not be a lot of people, so I might look at the popular attractions and say, okay, where are some places where those are great, but if I want to take a day or two and not be around thousands of people or hundreds of people where I can just maybe have some peace and quiet to take myself or my family, what does that look like? And then I'm going to look at directions on how to get there, as far as even from, is it within walking distance from the hotel? Can I save money versus taking a taxi or an Uber? I'll research different places to eat around the area where it might be more economical than others without getting back to experiences without sacrificing the experience. I'm not going to penny pinch to the point where, wow, this is miserable. We're staying in a cheap place that's uncomfortable and we're eating horrible food. But I'm going to plan it to the certain degree of, okay, when I get there, I have an idea of what we would like to do, how much it's going to be, and that can help me set the agenda and the budget, months in advance as far as, okay, how much do I need to save? What do I need to expect? What kind of buffer can I build in?
Well, and it was important, you mentioned, the balance of it, that you do want to be conscious of how much you're spending, but at the same time, you don't want to limit yourself into an experience that isn't as good, experience that you might not as enjoy. But the important thing to remember is everything costs. Everything costs, whether it's travel, whether it's you're grabbing a souvenir, what you're eating, just being aware that there are costs in everything. And sometimes it's the difference in between, like you said, walking can be a difference between how much it costs to get somewhere quickly versus how much I can save if I get there. It takes a little bit longer, but I can do it at my own power.
Right.
That kind of thing. So you mentioned experiences versus things. Would you dive a little bit into that, like what that means from a budgeting standpoint or from a financial standpoint, how you approach that?
Right, and it depends on the trip. I'm not against spending money. I'm happy to do it if it, for example, airfare might be, let's say airfare for myself and my two daughters. Let's say that's $2,000. But if we get to a place that we've never been before and the experience of, wow, now we're here, we've never been here, we're together as a family, no one can ever take away these memories, totally worth the $2,000. Then when we get there, it's, well, what are some things that we can do if it's hiking in the mountains in Colorado, or if it's taking advantage of, it might be walking around a museum or an art museum that might have free admission that day, and kind of planning that way and going, wow, we would have never seen this Van Gogh or this Picasso piece had we not looked at it. But it was worth the price of admission as far as the trip. But wow, we could take it, and that was absolutely free, and we got to spend this all day. How many people get to experience that in their lifetime? So it's hopefully that helps with regards to the experiences of. Yeah, it might cost a little bit of money to get there, but not everything has to break the bank once you arrive at your destination.
And you're right. Sometimes the best, the coolest things on trips I've been with my family, things are things that you find for free or things that were inexpensive that you just didn't know about. And we were talking off air before we started a little bit about the downside of a social media society, in that you see what everybody's doing and you see all the experiences everybody has. You're like, oh, that's a really cool experience. But sometimes the ones you see the most are the most expensive experiences, or the ones that are just being promoted for whatever reason.
Right.
You don't have to have those experiences to have a good experience.
Right.
And you put in your prep work, you just said, forget the Joneses. Would you explain a little bit what you meant by that?
Yeah. So the saying, it's off of keeping up with the Joneses. And what I like to tell my students these days is keeping up with Facebook or Instagram. I think it's very rare that somebody will put their worst day or worst case scenario on Facebook or Instagram. It's usually the best snapshots, if you will, or doing it for the gram, the moments of their life. So when it comes to vacation, I think, hey, look where we're at, look what we get to do. At least that's what is projected. And somebody like me might take a look at it and go, oh, wow, that must be really nice. Or, wow, look at them having all the fun, or look at that experience. But internally, I don't know, yeah, but did they finance that? And now they finance a $10,000 vacation on credit cards with interest, and after paying them off, if they ever do, it cost them $20,000, right? Or did that vacation, they're putting all the best things forward, but was there so much anxiety and strife, and maybe two spouses that were arguing the whole time when they got home, they called it quits on their marriage. Yeah. Anyway, it's just, my point being is you always see the good things on the outside, what people project, but you don't see what's happening inside. So worry about your own experiences and what you're able to take away versus what everybody else is doing.
Well, and now we live in an age where, and they've made it so you have to. Before it was always a bit of a roll of dice, but people all have experiences because it's a paid promotion, or they're getting. It's an advertisement basically, and so they get to go because they're getting discount rates or they're getting something comped. That's not the case for everybody. So you need to be aware of that kind of thing,
right?
And so be aware of what your budget is and what you can do on that budget, and have that fit to the trip that you want to do, whatever it may be. Or you look for an experience and see, where can I have this experience for something that I can afford. So let's say you've done that. You've determined where you want to go, kind of have an idea what you want to do, and you need to start saving on how to so you can get there. But you've never really done that before. You've got your regular daily budget going, but you're trying to plan for an expenditure on the side. What advice or what ways do you prepare yourself financially for a vacation you're choosing once you've chosen that? How do you approach that setting aside those funds?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to approach it. First thing for me, I would look at what's my timeline. So if I know I'm taking this vacation, let's say it's a year from now, okay, can I plan to take out, and I'm just using this as an example, depending on what the vacation might be, airfare, hotel, everything included. What's that going to be? Okay, how much can I start taking out of my paycheck right now? Is it $100? Is it $200 a month or per paycheck? Just start putting that away in, in some banking institutions even have vacation accounts, that you can save. So can I put that away and save that way? Or some people, if they know they're expecting a bonus at some time during the year, they might say, hey, every year if I'm expecting this bonus, or nothing's guaranteed, but if my bonus is virtually guaranteed, that money that I'm going to get, that's going to be allotted for the vacation. And they kind of plan backwards from there. I'm getting a $5,000 bonus, so whatever we can make with work with $5,000, that's going to be our vacation budget. So those would be two ways that I would take a look at, hey, if I'm getting a bonus, or can I budget beforehand as I'm getting, my steady paychecks.
And there's also at times in my own life where it's been, okay, I'm going to sacrifice spending on this, whether it be going out to a meal that we normally do as a family, or a certain expenditure that we have. I'm going to set that aside. Instead of doing it for these weekly things, I'm going to set aside for vacation that's upcoming. Right. So you can do that, but it's just a matter of figuring out what your regular budget is and where you can afford outside of that. And that changes. Sometimes especially when you're first starting out, it's not as much as it might be later on.
Right.
Or sometimes actually the opposite happens before you have kids and family and things like that. You might have a little bit more, discretionary funds that you can use on that. So, but it comes and goes. And it's just a matter of seeing where you're at in that moment and what you want to do in that moment and where you're going. In your experience, I'm just going to ask personal experience here. Yeah. What are the little forgotten expenses that you've learned over the years that when you first started that kind of popped up that you're like, oh, I didn't really budget for that because I didn't think about that. For me, sometimes it's the snack in the airport. That I didn't really think about, or the souvenir that I just found that was just too cool to pass up. Those little things have popped up on my trips, and I'm cognizant of them before I started. Okay, this is going to cost me a little extra here or there. What things have you come across that you now plan for in those budgets with your family or for yourself?
I would say before I had kids, make maybe little forgotten incidentals or small meals here. Or just I didn't foresee that coming. If it was an Uber expense that I might not have planned for, or something out of pocket. Now with kids, it's okay if one of them gets sick, just nauseated or headache or whatever. Okay, do I have the money set aside? Can I pick up some Tylenol real quick, or some cough medicine, or things like that? Or to me, it might seem like, wow, that's just a trinket. I would never buy something like that. But to them, it's the world. So it's like, okay, you know what? There's $10 or $15. Might not be of much value to me, but the value is there with regards to, wow, letting them get that, letting them experience it. And my kids still have things that are up in their room, and they're like, I'll look at them and be like, you still have that? Like, oh yeah, remember this, and this. And I'm like, holy cow, it's totally worth the $20 that I thought was ill-advised, but to them, it meant everything.
So with that, now you've done your planning for the trip ahead of time. You got everything planned out. You got it. This I'm going to spend here X, Y, and Z. I've got my whole list set up, and then you go on the trip. And you know as well as I do that nothing ever goes exactly as planned. I don't care how meticulous you are, unless your plan is to sit in a room and not move. It never goes according to plan.
Right.
Even then. So how do you maintain a budget while on the trip, or how do you adjust on the fly when you're there? I mean, is there a way to, like, do you advise tracking as you go? Do you advise like envelopes per day? How do you, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to try and maintain a budget or have an adjustable budget on the fly while on a trip and still have the experience but not have the stress of worrying about running out of money or those little things that pop up?
Right. So I think there's a couple of different ways to approach it. You could budget as you go. You could do sort of like the envelope system. Both are great. For me personally, the envelopes are probably not going to work because I don't want to carry 6 or 7 different envelopes full of cash. I usually plan ahead, and I have the amount set aside with my debit card. But then anything that comes up off of the fly, that's where I have a credit card set aside, and it's not abused. It's okay. I know I have the money set aside. I'm going to pay this off, but it's just in case. I'm big on when I'm on vacation, I don't want to feel stressed. So if something happens, and you're right, it always does. Something always comes up. If there's a flight delay, if I've got to spend an extra night, I'm not going to stress about, where's the money going to come from? What's going to happen? I can do it. I can be as relaxed as possible. Just try my best to go with the flow because, like you said, there are things that are going to happen where it's inevitable, flight cancellations, delays, whatever it might be, rainy days. And it's like, okay, what's plan B? Let's make the most of it. And yeah, if I'm out an extra $250, $500, it's not the most ideal thing, but if it saves a ton of anxiety in the future, to me, it's money well spent.
And that that reminds me of those expenditures that you don't always think about, or the aspects you don't always think about before a trip is travel insurance. That's something to consider. There's been trips where I've just like, no, I'm okay without it. There's been trips like, yeah, I definitely, just in case, I want to have this because it's a big, whatever the type of trip is. The other one for me was international travel. The first time I went international travel, I didn't even think about it. And thankfully, I had somebody who was experienced and told me, I didn't talk to my bank beforehand to say, hey, I'm going to be overseas and I have this credit card or I have this debit card. Right. And sometimes you have to have it ready to go. You have to have it approved. And you also want to let them know sometimes you're going overseas because otherwise you might get flagged for fraudulent because they're seeing activity that's not normally on your card.
Right.
You get, I've gotten that before where I get contacted and say, oh, we saw this charge. We want to make sure it's not fraud. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm there. It's me. But I appreciate it. They're looking out for me, but I didn't let them know ahead of time. So that's another thing to be considering when you're doing those budgets. If you do have the cards as a backup, if that's your means, make sure your bank knows or your credit card company or whoever, and find out what their rules are for cell phones overseas, things like that. Right. And those are expenditures. A little one like if you're traveling outside of the country, you might need an adapter for your electronics. Right. That's something that I'll admit I blew a breaker in Germany once because I didn't realize that. Thankfully, the hotel was very nice. But I was like, I can plug this in, plugged it in, and everything went dark. These are little expenditures and little things that you may not be aware of. And so building a little bit of a cushion is not a bad thing whenever you're going into it, just to have a little bit of a buffer in case something does go a little bit sideways and you're not stressed over it and things are not falling apart because of it.
Right.
You've given a lot of good advice on this and people are hearing things that are really good, but if somebody wanted to find out more or wanted to talk to somebody about how to budget and things like that, what resources are there? Both, general public website resources and also for students here at the university, if they're listening and they're like, I want to make a trip this summer or my next spring break trip or whatever it may be, but they want to talk to somebody about it and kind of get some planning. What options are there for them to reach out and get some help?
Yeah. If they're a student at the university, shoot me an email. I mean, to me, I've always felt that it's the price of tuition. So reach out to me. I'm happy to help. I'll never tell somebody what they should do, but I'll ask questions and, hey, have you considered this? What about this? The more knowledge, the better. And I think part of it is a lot of learning is done by the experience, so they take the vacation, have fun. So use me as a resource for students here. There's a number of different areas to look at from travel websites. You've got your Expedias, you've got your, Travelocity, I think is another one, none of which I'm endorsing, but there's a lot of information to find out there as far as what's available. What are my options? If they're using Airbnb or VRBO, what are the insurance policies? Should I get the insurance? What does it really cover? I mean, am I buying the peace of mind? Do I know what I'm buying, or am I really only buying insurance for a limited subset of events that are covered versus a ton of things that usually aren't? You staying on travel insurance. For me, if I'm traveling overseas, I'm probably looking at the travel insurance, or if I'm looking at booking a trip, but there's a slight possibility I have to cancel because of something else, I might look into travel insurance to make sure that it covers it. Out of the country, for sure, auto insurance and health insurance, I'm getting coverage because it's my for example, Geico's not going to cover me driving overseas, nor is my health insurance going to cover me out of the country either. Right. So that's something I'm certainly going to take a look at. Otherwise, there's plenty of, talk about your finance gurus or people at your bank that can help set aside a budget. Hey, this is what our vacation savings club means, and getting more information that way. I mean, it never hurts to ask, and then folks can just go from there as far as what works well for them. And then even as easy as, I know I want to take a vacation someday. I'm not sure where it is, but I'm going to put $20 from each paycheck away, and I'll decide once I have $3,000 built up, then I'll decide, hey, what can I do with $3,000? If that helps.
Yeah. And there's, I've done both those things where I've said, okay, this is where we want to go. This is a specific, and this is how we need to get there. And then there's also been the times like, we want to go somewhere we don't know, but this is what we have available. Mm-hmm. And both are viable, and both have been fantastic trips in very, very different ways. We've had great experiences on both. But yeah, it comes down to asking, mm-hmm. Just asking, and whether it be as a student here, like you said, reaching out to you, and we'll have Sterling's email in the bio if anybody wants to reach out that way. Or reaching out to the bank and just saying, what are my options? What do you have? Because there are places that do have those vacation funds, and sometimes they have deals on it. There's a special rate for it or a special way. If it's in X amount of months, then you get X amount of bonus on that, almost like a Christmas club kind of thing.
Yeah.
They have those types of things as well. And so, reach out and find out what options are there, because that first venture into leisure travel, into leisure activities, into vacations is an exciting time. Because you're learning a whole lot about yourself, and you're learning a whole lot about the process, and it really is. I remember those days a while back now, but I remember those days and remember the excitement of that opportunity. And so it's something that I encourage. I know you encourage it, just to go out and have those experiences.
Well, and one thing I've taken away from visiting a place for the first time was just the experience, the newness. It was wonderful. But what's really cool is when I've gone back to those places a few times, and then you start learning, I don't have to stay at this place again. That was a little bit more expensive. Now I can stay here. I've learned this. I can get from point A to point B. Wow, I took an Uber there. I can get there just as fast walking if I do this, this, and this. So what I've learned is I'm not beating myself up if I spent more money than what I normally would initially, but it's kind of cool. The more I go back to places that I have visited, you find out, you become more familiar, and you're like, wow, I can do this. Wow, I don't have to do this. And that can end up saving some money and free up even more time for experiences versus what is there to do? How do I get there?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That if you go back somewhere the second time, just in the fact that you don't spend as much time trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not necessarily a financial savings all the time, just in a time savings. That where do I want to go to dinner? Well, the first time you're like, okay, what are my options? Second time you're like, I remember this place, I really liked it, or I heard about this place, I really liked that, I want to try that. Mm-hmm. And it just saves you that time, and then you use that for something else, and it just snowballs. Right. But the experience breeds learning, and learning is then used later on, right. And it's just so helpful for that.
And I think at one point, potentially for our student listeners, and I'm not telling them to mooch off of their friends, not at all, but as they're building connections and networking, students, when they graduate, they're going to be living in different cities. A potential opportunity to take a vacation is, hey, you know what? I was really good friends with this person. We're still really great friends. They live in New York City, or they live in Austin or San Francisco or wherever. Hey, I'm thinking about visiting. Would you mind if I stayed with you? And sometimes, and again, there's that fine line between inviting yourself and right. mooching versus the person might be genuinely interested in having you there. And that could be a great way to not only experience and get familiar with the city that you want to, because somebody that is already there, but maybe to save on expenses. And I'll fully admit I've done that, not self-invited, but people have said, hey, if you ever want to come visit, and I'm like, you know what? I'm one of those people. I'm going to take you up on that offer. What works best for you? And that's, with experiences, it's been invaluable. From a saving standpoint, it's saved me thousands of dollars.
For sure. And it does. It enhances the experience if you have that connection, and you just never know. So ask. Mm-hmm. Shoot it out there. And if someone's like, I'm not really feeling that, hey, no problem. We'll move on a different direction. But that's part of, figuring out what you want to do and how you want to do it. Yeah. And the other advantage of that is if you do know somebody local, they often know the places to go that you're not going to find right. on a travel guide. The cool little shop, or the cool little area, mm-hmm. The little secrets of the area that right. you might not find in other ways. And I can tell story upon story on my own experiences on some of those. But yeah, it's a huge part of that. And so it comes down to ask, take a chance, but prepare yourself. If you prepare with a mindset of this is what it's going to cost me to get there, or this is what I have to spend to get there, you'll find something that fits into that budget. Mm-hmm. You can find an experience for any budget, yes. No matter what it may be. It may not be all the same experience, it may not be all the same places, but you can find something that you can grow, that you can have that memory from and really enjoy.
Yeah.
Sterling, thank you so much for coming in again. I really appreciate having you on. You're such a great guest. So it's always entertaining to talk to you, and I learn as I talk as well. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming in and talking about vacation planning with us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
half the fun of being a college student is learning about yourself and learning new things and having those experiences, whether it be locally or while traveling with friends, solo, whatever it may be. But everything does cost. And so we want you to be prepared. We want you to have an idea of how to start, of what to think about. And so if you have questions about this, if you're not sure where to start, how to set the budget aside, how to take the budget you have and find things that fit into it, reach out to us. Reach out to Sterling Raskie at Gies. Reach out to us here at Healthy Illini. We'd love to put you in contact with somebody. If we don't have the answers for you, or we don't have the expertise to share with you, we will find somebody who does. That's why we're here on campus. That's why we do what we do, is because we like helping students find their experiences, find out who they are. So please reach out. If you have questions, comments, as always, let us know. We want to hear from you. But thank you for joining us today. You are on a personal journey, no matter where you are in it. You are important and you matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter, and we're here to keep you well to excel. So go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing, and we'll catch you next time on Healthy Illini.